Hello!
Yo!
Welcome to Holistically Holy, a podcast exploring what it means to be a Christian in the modern world.
I'm Emmanuel, that's Savannah.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome back. Today we're talking about, are we addicted to our pastors?
We're talking about really cringy.
What's cringy? Us?
Yes. We're
That's
talking
great. I love
about Christianity in parasocial relationships.
And you might be asking, what is a parasocial relationship? I'm dying to know.
Yeah, so we're going to dive right into this. We do have another episode introducing who we are and our background and why we did this, if you want to check that out. We also have some episodes about our journeys with mental illness. So feel free to go check those things out. We're in a series on psychology, Christianity and psychology.
Yeah.
So we kind of started out with the intense stuff, and now we're getting to something...
A little chill.
I mean, I guess it's still intense.
It's kind of intense.
But not for us. We don't have the personal intense
You don't?
experiences. Not parasocial relationships.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Okay, anyways, I'll define
I'm
it.
also sure, but maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe you're all sure, and you shouldn't be.
Okay. So, parasocial relationships
Is
occur...
it like parasailing? I'm sorry, I had to.
I'm disappointed in you. Parasocial relationships occur when you or someone experience a one-sided emotional attachment with a fictional character, a media personality,
I'm attached.
or
sorry.
in this case, a pastor.
Pastor.
Dun dun dun.
So, can we think of some regular normal examples? Nothing crazy, but if you had to define a parasocial relationship, like with imagery,
So
like with a scenario, like
the first thing
an
that comes to
example.
mind is Christina Grimmie. Have you heard of her?
Kristen Grimmie? Who? No, maybe.
She was a singer who I believe got really famous
Oh,
on
the
YouTube.
Oh, I have heard of her. This
Mhm.
is so sad.
And then she got really famous and she was doing different concerts. And I don't know all the details, but one of her fans was super obsessed with her.
Yeah.
And shot her at a concert.
Isn't that also like Selena, the singer you also like? Is that
no,
because it's not parasocial. Oh, this is a good counterbalance though, because in that situation it was her fan manager,
yeah,
or like not publicist, but like someone who
Mhm.
manages her business, and so they knew each
they did
other.
know each other.
And so if you know the person like personally, it's not parasocial.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about this because both of us have felt at different times that people kind of idolize pastors
Mhm.
and put them up on this huge pedestal, but then also start to feel, I don't know how to put it into words.
Like the emotional
Yeah, to
attachment.
feel this like huge emotional attachment with that person
Yeah.
that isn't necessarily founded in
Not healthy.
relationship.
And if we're talking spiritually, as that starts to happen, the problem can be that maybe you care and are more attached to that person, whoever it
Mhm.
is, rather than to Jesus,
Yeah.
who that's like, as a Christian, the person you're supposed to be becoming more and more like. And so
Yeah.
it can actually supplant
It can be
your faith. It can
dangerous.
be a form of idolatry. It can just be really messy.
Yes, and in the most dangerous versions of this, it either can lead to the situation with Christina Grimmie, which I don't know if there are any examples of that with pastors, but like where the fan harms that person, or it can lead to when the parasocial
Yeah,
forget the pastor will say the
subject of the parasocial relationship.
Yeah, it can end up where the subject can exploit those fans. And so I want to talk about one example.
Okay.
And this is a pastor, but he's a pastor of a cult. So not necessarily like real Christianity. There are examples of that also, but this is like an example of a really intense, dangerous form of it. So his name is Robert Shin. And a lot of you probably already know who that is.
From the Netflix documentary.
Yes, he's from a Netflix documentary, I believe was called Dancing with the Devil, the viral TikTok 7M something. I don't remember what it was called. But he was
that sounds really close though.
Yeah, he was a pastor of a Korean church in California, and had kind of this position where he was making himself out to be God. So he considered himself the man of God, whatever woman he was with at the time was the woman of God, and they had this like authoritative role in the church. And so there's a lot of stuff about cults too, which could be a whole other episode. But in terms of the parasocial relationship, he kind of facilitated that. Like he wanted people to feel that way about him. And so a lot of his congregants started to feel like they needed the approval of the man of God. Like they knew him, like he cared about them. Like they started to feel all these things when like many of them didn't even actually personally know him. And because in this case he was the bad, crazy, evil one, he took advantage of them. And so when he saw people who were vulnerable and who felt like they had this attachment to him and like they needed him, he like took advantage of them and abused them financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically, in every single way.
The whole 9 yards.
So that's like not necessarily happening in most of our churches, thankfully.
Hopefully.
I mean, there are
Fingers
examples
crossed.
of it in more mainstream Christian churches. Like we thought of, oh
Mark
my
Driscoll.
gosh, Mark Driscoll. We thought of Robert Morris, I believe.
I'm not sure who that
And
is. Who's the guy from Hillsong? Is it
oh my
Hillsong or
gosh,
Elevation? Which one is like?
people definitely have parasocial relationships with Stephen Furtick, but
Oh,
I don't, as far as I know, there
is Stephen
hasn't
Furtick
been,
Hillsong?
no, that's Elevation.
Oh, it's
As
Elevation.
far as I
Okay,
know, there haven't been like huge scandals with him,
not with him, but the
but
Hillsong, the Hillsong guy.
I don't remember his name.
I don't either. We
Um,
should put that somewhere in post. But I do know people. There's lots of conversation all the time about like prophets, like man
yeah,
of God type vibes, which
yeah.
are a little sketch
So
for
those are
me.
examples where like the subject of the parasocial relationship is actively trying to facilitate
Yeah, it's trying
that.
to cultivate it.
Which here's the tricky thing is obviously it can be used for abuse and it can be horrible in that way, but there also is a way for pastors to do that in a way they're trying to be authentic. They're trying to encourage people. They're trying to show people real life examples of what it looks like to follow God. Like if a pastor, if he or she opens up on, not on
A personal story.
stage, yeah, like opens up about a personal story, then it can be this awkward thing where people in the congregation start to feel like they know the pastor really, really well
Hmm.
when they just know a story about them.
Yeah.
And there is, let me look at my notes.
There's the 1.5. Are you looking for the 1.5?
Yeah.
There's another like subcategory of a parasocial relationship that's sort of like it's not quite there's no screen separating you. It really I think applies to the pastors a little bit more directly because it is
Yeah.
unique in that the parasocial relationship can be created, but you might meet the pastor in like the congregation after the service and shake his hand or chat with him or come to him with a
Yeah.
prayer request or so many different things can happen after the sermon before everybody leaves or before the next service starts. And so those are all really genuine moments you might have with the pastor where they pray with you, talk with you, get to know your story, you ask for advice, you cry, you hug. Like there's so many things that can happen that are all totally fine, but you might walk away thinking, we're best buds. And
Yeah.
that might be like a bridge too far. And so a lot of I think the goal of the podcast is to think about okay, what is the parasocial relationship, but how can we kind of check ourselves to make sure we're not taking it too far for our own
Hmm.
benefit as much as the pastor. It's like keeping yourself safe and the pastor safe.
And also, I mean, like we both have, you more so than I do, but we both have positions of leadership.
Yeah,
And so also for you as the leader who like is on stage a lot talking, like to
a group of people, the
protect them, to
students.
protect
Yeah,
yourself thing. So the 1.5 category, which we found from sciencedirect.com. It sounds really lame. I don't know what the actual article is, but I can link.
cite your sources.
I'll link it. And so in this case, it's not talking about pastors. They're talking about mostly like
Media
Twitch
stars.
live streamers,
Oh, like
actually.
live streamers specifically.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
so I'm gonna read the quote. It says, "The proliferation of online media micro celebrities, which we're
So like
considering,
Twitch streamers
yeah, but we're considering pastors
as
micro
micro-celebrities. That makes
celebrities,
sense.
via live streaming has shifted the nature of parasocial relationship away from the classic one-sided relationship, like the Christina Grimmie situation, where the fan did not have a relationship with her at all, towards a one and a half sided relationship characterized by the potential for reciprocal communication, strong, excuse me, strong community affiliation, fandom cultures, wishful identification, high emotional engagement, and increased presence. So in the live streamer like example, there is more of like you might put something in the chat and the live streamer might call you out. Like I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know
and in
anything
that
about
case, you can
that.
actually pay the streamers to notice your thing more because if you do a donation, streamers will more are oftentimes reading comments from donations,
Oh
so they can
yeah.
want to get involved. But a lot of times, yeah, you leave a comment, they respond directly to the thing you said in the chat, or they say something that you were thinking, or you're literally spending hours of your life watching this person every day at the same time. They tell you about your life, like it just forms a
Mm-hmm.
bond. And pastors are similar because you go and you hear them talk for like 30 plus minutes a week and you learn about their life and you watch them
Yeah.
cry and you hear about all their struggles and you pray for them. And none of those things are bad things all on their own, but that's why it's like a warning. You have to be careful that you're not taking it too far because the
Mm-hmm.
parasocial relationship is the individual's problem. Like the Christina
Christina Grimmie.
I mean, she didn't have any idea that that person existed, so she wasn't intentionally trying to do anything. And the pastors also, if they're healthy pastors, are probably not trying to facilitate the parasocial relationship too far, but it's like a natural thing that happens when you listen and watch a person frequently over a long period of
Mm-hmm.
time and you learn them, learn about them, and you're emotionally invested in them. It's just like it's a thing that is out there.
Yeah.
It's a force of nature that can eat you.
I just realized that we're not centered in that.
Oh no,
Can you fix it?
I don't.
It's like really bad actually.
What do you mean we're not centered?
Look, sit back. Look. Look at all this space over
I
here.
can edit that in post. It's like literally no problem.
Okay.
So, anyway, the 1.5 category applies to pastors
Mm-hmm.
because they are going to meet with people. Like, it's not just a screen between them. They do get the opportunity to say, oh, like, I'm going to come chat with you. I'll pray with you. I'm going to talk to you, like we said. So, like, it applies really directly, and they are micro celebrities. Why would you say a
Yeah.
pastor's a micro celebrity?
Why?
Yeah.
Um, because they are up in front of a large group, generally, a large group of people consistently. And so they have kind of that like attention and that popularity. And also they have a certain level of like influence and power. Which again, depending on the person and depending on how healthy the person is and how healthy the congregation is, that influence and power like can look
All
very
kinds of
different.
different ways. Yeah.
Um, but I would say that's mostly why. And also there is kind of the encouragement generally from pastors of like come talk to us, like there's that sort of thing which kind of can facilitate it too.
Yeah.
Though that would facilitate like the 1.5 thing.
Yeah. I think the biggest part of like celebrity is the idea of a lot of people view pastors as above them
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
because like it's the language sometimes you're like, well, I'm under this pastor. It's like an internship. Like every Christian is like in a weird
It really
internship
weirds me out when
with
people
their
say
pastor. No, no, I
that.
don't. It's not my favorite term
I mean, I
either.
get it.
And I understand because they're teaching you. It's like this emulated rabbi like
Yeah.
follower thing where they know something you don't because they went to school, hopefully,
Hopefully.
and also you don't know the thing and they have knowledge you want, and so you
Right.
view them like you would a teacher or a professor or just anyone who's like more knowledgeable than you. There's like reverence or deference that
Yeah.
comes with it, and so there's naturally by like this gap that
Yeah.
appears, and they're looking up at you, and that also kind of creates this like, oh, they're so much more holier than I am. They have so much more experience. They're so much kinder. Like they're such a
Mm-hmm.
great guy. Like I just love the way he communicates, and like
Yeah.
all those emotions are again totally fine, totally genuine. Probably if you didn't feel that for your pastor, I'd be concerned. Like, is your pastor not
Yeah, you
a
should
very nice guy?
feel like respect
And you should feel
for
the
them.
respect, but you do not want to feel like they are your best friend. Your best friend should feel like your best friend, and you see them and you talk to them and you
Yeah.
hang out and you like all those types of things. Because there are going to be people who have that level of relationship with the pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can go get lunch with your pastor, maybe. You can go have a meeting. You can go chat and talk. Like, that's that 1.5.
Yes.
But they
Mm-hmm.
might not tell you everything they're going through. Maybe they'll share something.
They might not give you their personal phone number. They might give you an
Yeah.
email.
They might give you an email. And they might, and also if like you're a woman trying to meet with a male pastor, they're hopefully going to be like, well, maybe my wife needs to be there. Or someone else trusted in the community who's a woman. And it's not going to be the same.
Or the other way around
Or
too.
the other way around. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
All those things. But it's to say is that it's kind of a natural phenomenon that can happen. You should Like hold affection for your pastors, but be aware. What are the negatives that do? Are all the research we did? Are there little blurbs about the negatives of what happens when you have these
I
attachments?
mean,
It's obsession. It
probably.
transfers into
Yeah.
obsession. I
Oh,
think.
it also
Ooh.
is like, how do I say? It's this a parasocial relationship a lot of times is this weird thing where it feels like there's no like fear of rejection because in this case if the pastor is supposed to be this like approachable, kind, loving man or woman, then there's not the risk of like this like it's not the same risk as in like a normal social
Hmm.
environment.
Yeah.
And so it can kind of I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say.
Well, it can facilitate those strong emotional connections
It can
because there's going to be
facilitate that.
hopefully again, if your pastor's good, they're going to be helpful and uplifting and kind and
Yeah.
really nice. You might not ever see them have a bad day,
But they do.
but they do. It's one of the things I love about our pastor. If he's having a bad day, he might just say it from the stage. He'll be like, "I'm so sorry, having a bad day. Like, be gracious with me."
Yeah. So this quote about that says, in some ways, parasocial relationships can appear safer because there's no risk of rejection, but there's also no possibility for a mutual relationship. So it's that like thing of risk. There's really no risk, but because of that, there's no like real
Genuine
strong,
connection.
genuine, I mean, maybe not connection, but like lasting relationship and friendship,
Yeah,
like deepness.
yeah.
Not that that can't happen, like I don't know, maybe you volunteer at your church a lot, or maybe you babysit your pastor's children. Like, there is obviously possibility because of that 1.5 situation that you could get to be really good friends
Hmm.
with your pastor, but we're just kind of talking like in general.
Yeah,
Because if you think about it, like, how many best friends can a person have? How
right.
many
Yeah.
close confidants can a person have? Like,
Yeah, and also their job is to not be you are not supposed to be their confidant necessarily,
mm-hmm,
or everyone can't be their confidant, and so they're there for you. We got to remember that they're there for you, and you're not there for them all the time, and that's totally okay. Like I
yeah,
don't always, I've sometimes people are like, "Oh, how can I pray for you?" And I'm like, "Well, am I about to get super personal with this person I just met,
right.
or I don't know very well?" And so that can be kind of awkward.
Yes, and
Um,
I believe, if I remember correctly, that we are going to do another episode about boundaries as people in leadership and ministry. So that will kind of tie into like the pastor or like person in leadership
yeah,
side of this.
yeah. So okay, let's say you find yourself in a parasocial relationship.
I think we should go back
Yeah,
before
we
that and
might.
say, how do you know if you're in a parasocial relationship?
Imagine you think maybe you're in a parasocial relationship.
Okay, fine.
How would you tell? How would you tell? How would you tell? And it's hard because this is something that we're talking hypothetically about. If you've ever experienced a parasocial relationship, post in the comments and tell us about your
Yeah, because
experience.
I would say, not unfortunately, but neither of us have
No,
experience with
no, I think I've
this.
seen it.
Yeah, but we don't have like personal experience in either, like in either
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
Well, would you say you have had some as like a youth leader, like some people, or like a person in leadership, like of people feeling like they have a closeness with you that they don't? I feel like that's probably happened to you.
Maybe, but normally that's a little easier because they're students and it's easy to uphold that boundary just because you can,
Yeah,
I'm not supposed to text them back all the time,
right, right.
I think there is kind of a jump. Like if you've ever thought about like fandom obsession, I feel like is an easy place to make the connection. If you ever had a
Hmm.
celebrity that you just have to know about, or
Yeah.
anyone, I mean, celebrity is just like But if there's a person that you're like, I need to know what they're doing. I'm gonna follow them on social media. I would see their posts. Maybe you like their posts. Maybe you comment. Are you? Because
Hmm.
I don't comment on social media ever. I don't know if I've ever. That's not true. Ever I have, but like in my entire life of like the last 16 years on social media, I think I probably commented less than I could count to.
I mean, that's
You know,
not necessarily the most,
no, but like I'm
like,
saying,
you're
like
not the
you might
average
start to.
person.
No, I'm no. She doesn't think I'm average. I think it's a good thing. But like if you're, what I'm saying is, if you feel like you have to comment on their posts, if you're hoping that they'll see you,
Hmm.
if you are really like if you know everything about their life, like where they went to school and how many kids they have and their wife's name and like the town they live in, or like you've watched every single thing they've ever done ever, and
Hmm.
you are really I just bumped the camera. I'm so sorry. And you're really willing to like talk to people about them. These are all things you're supposed to like be hyped for Jesus about. And it's
Yeah.
actually why it's kind of problematic if you're obsessed with your pastor and not with Jesus, because you're going to do all the things for your pastor that you should be doing for Jesus. Like you will
Hmm.
evangelize about your pastor more than you will for Jesus. And so like
Hmm.
that's a bit of a rant. But
No, I mean, you had said something when we were planning this about someone you knew who you felt like you couldn't tell if they were following Jesus or if they were
oh,
following
yeah, I
someone
would love to
else.
tell this story. Thank you
Go
for
ahead.
reminding me. I had forgotten, but I was in a small group with a guy, which are like community groups, you know? So you meet a person's house and you eat some snacks and you talk about the sermon in your life, and it's like, that's cool, and
Hmm.
it's an awesome thing to do. If your church has community groups, you should join them.
You should totally do it.
But we had this guy who was like a big Rick Warren fan. Now, Rick Warren wrote a book called A Purpose Driven Life, and it's just all about like being a good person. It's a Christian tie-in. I haven't read all of it. I've read like
Hmm.
snippets a long time ago, so I don't remember enough about it to talk about the book. But here's what was interesting. When in the course of like talking about the sermon and answering questions, like doing all the stuff you do in a small
Yeah.
group, he would often refer to like my guy or like the book I run my life by. And because he talked
Hmm.
about Rick Warren and he talked about a purpose driven life so much,
Right.
I sometimes couldn't tell if he was talking about Jesus or Rick Warren
Yeah.
or a purpose driven life in the Bible. And I like was afraid to ask because I'm like, I don't want to be a jerk and be like, is your guy Rick? Like, because maybe he thought it was obvious, and I'm just dumb, and I'm just
Yeah.
dense. But he would talk about how he like got people a purpose-driven life. Like he would give people that book,
Yeah.
and now maybe he's trying to evangelize because he's like, oh well, maybe they want me to read the Bible, but to read
Right. It's
this
more
guy's book because it's
accessible.
kind of more like
Accessible.
accessible and
Yeah.
all that stuff. But then it still left me with all that like, oh, but now I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Now I don't know,
Which is dangerous. I
and
mean,
that
we've
could just
talked
be
about that,
my problem. But
but
yeah,
no, I think that happens a lot. Like people get really obsessed with either like their pastors or celebrity pastors or Christian influencers, and like we said earlier, it's a good thing to have like respect for them and to listen to them because the Bible says like iron sharpens iron. It also talks about the importance of leadership and the importance of people teaching and encouraging you in the Word of God. So, like, there is that level of it that's important, but then also there can be so much like disenchantment if
mhm,
you follow a person and then they screw up. Like, one of two things can happen, or one of two negative things can happen and that you start to shift your worldview and your actions because you think that you want them to be right. You identify with them so strongly, like you feel that they are right.
yeah,
And so when they diverge from like doctrine, like orthodoxy, you start to follow them and you start to twist things so that you say, like, that is what is the truth. So that can happen. Or you can be so like wounded and hurt by it that you're is disenchantment a word?
yeah.
That you're disenchanted and you lose your faith. Those are the two
Mhm.
bad options. The good option, obviously, is to realize like that all people are people and
Yeah.
fail. And but I mean, I think we've seen this a lot too. You might have to edit this part out if you. We'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it.
Depending on like we see this a lot too with political figures also,
Yeah.
where people start to follow like that version of Christianity and they start to, for different reasons, identify with it so strongly or whatever.
Hmm.
And so they start to shift and believe or convince themselves or are indoctrinated into thinking like, oh, this is the real Christianity. That like I'm following this person
Yeah.
and this person is a man of God or this person is a woman of God. This person was sent by God. So I'm following that and I'm spending more time listening to that. I'm spending more time supporting that
Yep.
than I am
Yeah.
the
A
Bible.
weird example of that, not politics, but related, because I think he spoke at I think he prayed at CPAC, is Russell Brand.
I don't
Do you
know
know?
what CPAC is.
It's a conservative convention.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But Russell Brand is like is he used to be like an atheist, like
Oh, I
kind
do
of
know who
hippie
that
guy,
is.
right? And
Yeah.
he's a Christian now, and I
Hmm.
can't tell if he's straight grifting or what, but because it's hard.
Can you define the word grifting?
Grifting is like he's just maybe found a faith and is talking with Christian language and willing to go and pray because he's an actor. Maybe he doesn't care because he knows he can make a lot of money off
Okay.
of like
He's
evangelicals.
monetizing
So he could be
something.
monetizing a thing he doesn't really believe in,
Yeah.
but he's realized, oh, I can get close to people with power and money. People will like buy my stuff and listen to me if I
Hmm.
espouse these ideas on social media.
Right.
Um, because again, you don't actually have a chance to know where they got like like for instance, like NFL guys. This is a deep cut, but it's all connected. I promise. I'll bring it all together. Is like sometimes NFL guys will quote scripture or they'll like thank you God. Everyone's like, oh my
Mm,
gosh, they're Christians, and the Christians all celebrate on Twitter. Like, oh my gosh, it's so great.
yeah.
But then you realize that they're like Mormon,
That's not the turn I thought you were
and you're
taking.
like, oh, this doctrine's completely different.
Yeah,
And you're like, oh, like it's really cool that he said like I'm only here because of God,
right.
but the doctrine of Mormonism is so different from like mainstream Christianity that
Yeah.
you're celebrating a guy who doesn't believe what you believe at all, because Mormons don't believe what like evangelicals believe
No.
at
Not
all.
even just evangelicals. They don't believe what like other
Yeah,
most
like what most Christians believe. Like I
Christians.
cancel me if you want. I don't think Mormons are Christians.
No, I don't think they are either. I mean,
So
maybe Jesus will save them, maybe, but I don't think that they're right about most
most things,
things
their doctrine's super different,
and dangerous.
but so that switch of like,
Sorry,
oh,
Mormons.
you might be like, oh, I love that guy. I want to follow him, and like it's so cool. He's like, I can now feel better about watching this celebrity.
Honestly, I feel like I had. You just hear the cat.
Oh, the cats are brawling out there.
We got two kitties. We'll post a picture. I feel like this is a whole other topic. I feel like Mormonism is built on a parasocial relationship.
Oh, fascinating.
What's that guy? What's his name?
John Smith, Adam Smith.
Yes, I think no. Adam Smith is the
Well,
economist.
I know a lot of conservatives who have a parasocial relationship with dead Adam Smith. But anyway, that's my history joke. Okay, but John Smith.
You never brought it back to whatever you were
Oh,
talking about.
well, because you're talking about like
You were talking
politicians.
about Russell Brand.
And so Russell Brand, like maybe he's grifting, maybe he's not. But now he has this huge platform, and people are like, "Oh, like I want to." Maybe you voted because you're like, "Well, Brand is a Christian, and
Yeah,
that's so cool." It's like, but is he? Like, there's no discernment. And as you
because you don't
connect
know
it
him
through,
personally.
and you because you don't know him
Mm-hmm.
personally, but we want to find. I think this is where I was going. You want to find a reason to justify, and that kind of is like what you said. That's when you start to follow people in too deep, and it's like maybe you've
Yeah.
lost the plot, and you care more about Russell Brand or insert whoever
Right.
than you do about like
Jesus.
Jesus. And that could be true
Losing the plot.
for anything. I mean, you
Yeah.
know lost your plot a little bit.
Um.
Parasocial relationships are dangerous.
Yes. So you had on here talk about Billy Graham,
Yeah,
and we didn't actually talk about what you want to talk about.
that's true. I mean, I have a lot of complicated, complex feelings about Billy Graham, but I've met a
Yeah.
lot of older Christians who were saved by like a Billy Graham rally that they saw on TV. So
Mm-hmm.
they might not have even gone.
Yeah.
And Billy Graham's a old school like preacher megastar who
Which here's.
literally would preach to stadiums full of people, like hundreds of thousands of people, or more if you counted who was watching on television at
Mm-hmm.
one time. He's really, really famous if you're not a Christian.
Weird fact. My family actually does know the Graham family. So it's like
This does make my
would
opinion
be a
talk about
parasocial relationship because I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
it
but some
did,
of them,
but I don't
yeah.
know him. But some of them
Yeah. But so
know
with
him.
Billy Graham, what that means is like he had a ministry where like more people saw him than ever met him, and people got saved,
Way
like way more,
more.
and people got saved and could never and not be discipled. Like imagine you're just like living at home and you're not a Christian. You actually don't know what church community is. You've never been in
Yeah.
church, but somehow you stumble across a Billy Graham crusade, which is what they call his like
Which
televised
is like
things.
we could start there. The
We
One
should do a
Crusade.
we need a Billy Graham episode if we're gonna do that. But so like
Yeah, stay tuned.
you watch that and you give your life to Christ, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And then you have no one to disciple you. You have to find your own church. You have to
Can
do
you
all these
define some
things
of those
by
words?
yourself.
Giving your
Which
life to
so
Christ,
like you
disciple.
become a believer, like a follower of Christianity. You believe Jesus
Hmm.
Christ died on the cross, rose from the dead for your sins. You believe you're a sinner, and like Billy Graham gets you to feel that and espouse that and
Hmm.
believe that. And so then you have to go find a church community. You might not know anything about doctrine. You might not know what's safe and all these other things. So that's one part of it. But the other part is
Yeah.
people talk about him like he is basically Paul the Apostle
Yeah, they do.
where they're like he is so amazing we need an other version of him like
Yeah.
they like yearn for someone as charismatic, not doctrinally,
No, I know what you mean.
but someone with the
Personality.
charisma
Yeah.
and the like personality and reach of Billy Graham.
Not Billy Graham with Riz.
He got mad Christian Riz, yo, because all those people
That's it.
who
The episode's over.
all those people I know like they really do love him, and
Yeah.
they really feel like he was probably like the best guy.
I think they feel about him the way that Esther is described, of like, you were appointed for such a time of as this.
Yeah,
Which I don't know. Maybe
maybe,
like there's a certain
maybe.
aspect of
But
that that's
but what
probably
that means is
true.
that they kind of ignore. They
The,
don't ever think about looking into his life as a whole and wondering, like, well, does he actually deserve, like, for us to think he was perfect? And there's
yeah.
danger in believing he wasn't perfect because of
You mean it
the
in believing he?
disenchantment. Oh, yeah, in
Oh
terms of
no, you're
believing he
right.
was right.
Wait.
And there's a danger in believing he was perfect.
Yes,
Sorry,
there we
I
go.
think I did misspeak. There's a danger in believing he's perfect because then people who find out he wasn't, spoiler alert, he wasn't,
Yeah.
then that two roads converging thing Savannah talked about earlier
Yeah.
can happen, and there are people whose salvation that will come into question because like, oh my gosh, is my
Right.
salvation legitimate because I was saved by a guy who I now think is terrible because he did some
Mm-hmm.
research or like heard a story or read an article or like whatever.
Yeah.
Ravi Zacharias is another example. People like you just don't want to put them on so much of a pedestal that you think that you knew them so well that you would think, oh, they could never do anything wrong. He would
Yeah.
never do that,
Right.
you know.
And that just also, I mean, I already talked about this, but opens the door for abuse.
It can. I don't think he personally ever
No, I'm
became
not
anyone
talking
like
about
that.
him. I've
Although I
never
don't
heard
actually
anything
know.
like
I need
that.
to do more deep dives into him.
I have never heard that, at least.
Yeah.
Um, there was a verse I wanted to read, and then I wanted you to talk about the book you've been reading because
Oh
I feel
yeah.
like it applies.
Okay. Sure.
So I just looked up on Google like verses about God being our mediator, because some of what we were talking about in terms of us idolizing pastors kind of reminded me of some of the struggles that people have with the Catholic Church,
Mm.
where they feel like the priest has to do some things. And so in that way, like, you're seeing the priest as not
Well,
seeing the priest as
in
God.
Catholicism, the
You're seeing
priest
the
is
priest as
literally higher than
your
you.
entrance
They're
to
closer to
God.
God. They talk to God for you.
Yeah,
Like priests are in Catholicism, like a cut above everybody else in
right.
doctrine.
So there's a verse in First Timothy 2:5
I love me some
that
First Timothy.
says, "There is one God and there is one mediator between God and men, and that is the man, Christ Jesus." So, yeah, when we have that parasocial relationship, or maybe not even that, but when we have that idolatry for a pastor, then we're putting that person, like, we're stripping ourselves of our autonomy and our faith,
Yeah, we're letting them
and we're
speak
giving
into
it to
us.
them,
We're
and we're
giving it to you.
letting
Yeah,
them,
that's really good.
yeah.
Preach, girl.
Thank
Preach,
you.
girl.
Whereas, like, that's what Jesus is for.
Yeah, that's
Please
good.
talk about your book.
Oh, the book. So my pastor gave to me. I don't know what he was trying to say. No, he gave it to me for a good. He gave it to me for a good reason. It wasn't anything bad at all. But he gave
Yeah,
me a book called Dangerous Calling by, was it Paul David Tripp? It's right over there. It's upside
I think
down.
this might be it.
But it's a book all about how being a pastor is dangerous,
Mm,
and for both parties. For the pastor, because it puts you in the middle of spiritual warfare, and it puts you at risk for all sorts of temptations that um, you never would have thought possible otherwise, you know? And so it's dangerous for the person who becomes a pastor because you're responsible for so many people
yeah,
and you're going to be exposed to so many more temptations than you would have thought possible. But it's also
right.
dangerous, therefore, for everybody else because when a pastor messes up, it affects his whole flock.
All I can think of is that song. Is it Neo or Ayaz? Who is it? Danger. It's Akon. Why do all those names sound the same? Neo, Ayaz, Akon. Dangerous. That girl is so dangerous.
And then YouTube strikes us into oblivion. That's okay. But no, so it's a book that just kind of helps people who are in positions of like church leadership because I count as that now.
Yeah.
Not now for a while, but it kind of just walks you through the pitfalls. And it's a whole book where it's like, here's all the stuff that can go really drastically wrong. You can get burnt out. Here's how you can get
Mm-hmm.
burnt out. But it does also has a lot of sections on remembering how big of a responsibility you have.
Yeah.
And it's because this type of relationship can exist. You have to be aware of, if you're in a position of church leadership, that people really look up to you, that people think that you have all the answers, and that you might even be more holy than they are and have a special connection to God that they
Mm-hmm.
don't have, which is not true. There's nothing special about me, and my connection with God is the same as anyone else's could be.
Right.
And so, like, you just need to be aware. You have to be so
Yeah.
careful.
And that's again because of that 1.5 relationship thing that we've talked about.
Yeah. because you can have a huge impact and influence, and people are listening to what you say and they're following your life, and they remember more than you might,
Yeah.
you know.
Another thing really quick that has worsened this phenomenon is the internet.
Oh yeah,
We have a quote that says,
made everything worse.
this is
Put it away,
from,
burn it to the ground.
all of our sources suck.
What is this one? Listen, sometimes you don't have time to read a whole journal article, okay? Sometimes you just can't do it because you're reading other journal articles for your graduate program.
Why, but this is killing me. This is from findapsychologist.org, which is so funny to me, but it's parasocial relationships and the nature of celebrity fascination. It says, oh, I lost what I was going to
Oh,
say.
no, no, no.
Okay.
Oh,
The internet allows for 24 access to media users, and increased internet dependency may lead to increased parasocial interactions. And this can definitely be a thing I'm thinking in terms of online church, which
Stephen Furtick.
that too, but
I mean, I've
I'm
only
thinking
ever
of
seen him
like
online.
I'm thinking of, I don't know, examples of people who have come to our church and been like, oh, like I found it online, I was watching it through COVID, which that's a great thing. I'm not
Yeah,
saying
that's
that's a bad
awesome.
thing.
That's the
But you
trouble about this conversation is everything is good until it becomes bad
yeah.
with this type of
Well,
thing.
that's sin.
True. But anyway, sorry, I
Sin is
interrupted you.
just twisting what's good. I don't think
Yeah,
there's any sin that exists apart from something that's good.
that's been broken.
Yes. So this is a stupid example. Um, but an example for me of because of that distance, me watching a pastor on a screen and then not being disenchanted, but realizing that I didn't know them like I thought they knew I knew them. So our church, we have like a head pastor, and sometimes there's videos of him, which usually we don't show them.
It's like once every
But
three
yeah, like
months.
occasionally we see a video of him. And I've been in our church for a long time, but I had never met him. And the first time I met him, I was so confused because he was tall. And in the videos, because of the way they framed it, I thought he was like a pretty short dude, but no, he was actually
Yeah,
like
he's like 6 feet.
super, super tall. And
Yeah.
then there was another time where he was at our church, but was like outside. And like he like had sunglasses on and a hat on. And I was like, who on earth is that? Like, why is this person lingering around her church? Do I need to call the police? And someone was like, no, like, that's our head pastor. And so, I mean, that's a very like tangible, not important example of this. But what I'm trying to say is if you form this parasocial relationship with someone, then it might turn out that like the person you think it is doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
And like when you actually get to know, if you actually get to know that person, you realize like you've made everything up, or like you have this person built up just based off of like your perceptions.
Yeah.
Which we talk about this with God sometimes too, of like God made us in his image, we're not supposed to make God in our image. And that ties into like the danger again of like following someone down the wrong path.
Yeah. That's
Does
true.
that make sense?
It does. That's a great
Okay,
example. I
thank
think
you.
so.
It's like a silly example, but
Yes, to bring it to a close,
yeah,
to wrap it up into a nice little box with a bow on top.
because I need to eat dinner.
Oh yeah, dinner. I also should eat a little bit more for dinner. Anyway, to wrap it up. So let's say you're like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm in a parasocial relationship with my pastor.
Yeah.
Here's a few things. Number one, don't panic. Okay.
Yeah, unless you're like planning on murdering them, it's really not
Oh
that big of a
gosh, you
deal.
went. Anyway, yeah, don't. That would be really bad. Seek professional help if that's how you feel, please.
Call the police on yourself if that's how you feel
Also that.
right now.
But I'd say don't panic because again, it's all these things are like good things that can go too far,
Yeah.
that sin can break. And so
Hmm.
instead, I think it would be important to remember that when it comes to going to church, you want to come to church with a critical mind, not a mind that's closed. You want to be like open and
Yeah.
willing to learn. And oh, I forget the fancy term we use for it in church, but just like you want to be well, there's
I have no idea what you're
spiritually
talking
curious. You want to come to
about.
church
Okay.
spiritually
Yeah.
curious, but you want to still be able to like remember the guy up there talking to you, whether it's through screen or on the
Or
stage,
the lady.
or the lady, the person up there talking to you, is just a person. They just a
Yeah.
guy. They just a dude. They just a lady.
Thank you.
I can
You
see
can
your
feel my daggers.
yikes. But they're just a person. They're just an
Yeah.
average Joe, an average Jane.
Wow. Like I can't say what I was supposed to. Never mind.
Anyway, they're just a person. They're just a normal guy, you know? And that has to be okay.
Yeah.
That has to be okay. And what you can do is remember that really the only thing separating you and them is like a lot of training and then a specific call from the Lord.
And opportunity.
And like opportunity. That's like I think maybe like
Yeah.
the smaller one, because like if the Lord had called you to be the pastor, then you'd be the one up there. And he didn't not call you because you weren't good enough.
Right.
That's
Right.
just not the reason.
Yeah.
It just you were destined for something else, and that's totally fine. But the idea is like there's not a lot separating you in that.
And I think one of the best ways to combat this is through community. Some of our research was talking about how loneliness can be a big factor in like a parasocial relationship. And I'm thinking again of the COVID times or of people who, for whatever other reasons, like aren't able to leave their house and go to church. Like that parasocial relationship or that idolatry is fomented a word? That just came to my mind. Fomented?
Fermented.
No,
Fermented.
no. Fomented.
Is fomented? Fermented is like you use it metaphorically. I've never heard fomented.
I might be
For like fermentations, like the growing of like when alcohol.
fomented, instigated, stirred up.
I've never heard this. I've heard of
It might be grown. I totally lost my train of thought. Sorry.
loneliness,
That might
foments.
yes, that might be grown especially through like just being at home, being on the internet, like watching them that way because you have no
Just doing your
context.
imagination.
You have
Yeah.
have no other people. You have no community. You're not actually seeing them in person. Like one of the best ways to combat that is to actually like talk to other people in the church. Which again, I know that everyone's situation is different. There are people who for whatever reasons, whether they're like caregiving or whatever else, like don't have access to that. But there are other ways that you can do that. Like, yeah.
But don't panic. Get into community, and then also like if you see that a person or a community or a pastor is welcoming that or like leaning into
Encouraging
it,
it,
encouraging it,
yeah.
that's a red flag. You should probably
Yes.
go somewhere else. Because the one
Yeah.
thing I love about our church is it's big. There are
Mm-hmm.
over 4,000 people that attend across all locations on a Sunday/Saturday
Yeah.
time. None of the pastors encourage that
Right.
behavior.
Right.
Like they actively lean away with it. They've read the book that I was given. They've read,
Did they
um,
all have to read that?
no, but I know that our specific
Oh,
location
okay.
pastor has. But
Yeah.
like they have that awareness though that they have to be careful, that they have a lot of power, but they also just like if you got to hang out with any of them, like we went on a mission trip with one of the locations, right?
Yeah.
And they just a guy, and they
Mm-hmm.
know that, and that humbles them in a really important way, and
Right.
and that is huge. It's
Mm-hmm.
huge. And I think that you just have to remember that it maybe you want to think about like, oh, if you're desperately looking for someone to connect to,
That's a whole other thing too. What is your motivation
what
for the
is your
parasocial?
motivation? What is
Yeah.
your motivation for that? We don't need to get into that because
No.
that's between you, God, and your therapist, hopefully.
Yeah.
But you just want to remember, like, oh, if I feel a need to connect with this person, I need
Mm-hmm.
them to like me. I need them to think I'm holy. I need them to think I'm good, or I need them.
Right.
You got some stuff to work through,
Yes.
and you should seek counseling.
Yes.
Please and thank you.
Yep.
Anything else?
I don't think so. Anytime we're like, oh, this is only gonna take like 2 minutes, it takes 45. Holy cow. Um, so yeah, that's that. Our next
Our next episode.
episode, give
I
me
think it's Dunning-Kruger.
half a
I
second.
think it's
Do you
Dunning-Kruger.
want to say what that is?
Well, I want to know if I'm right first before I explain what it
Sorry,
is.
guys, dude. Yes, it is.
Dunning-Kruger effect, which is when you think you know a lot about something, so you act kind of in like a, I know a lot about this, so I'm going to really throw myself out there sort of way, but in reality, you don't know as much as you think you do.
Yes. All right, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening. If you have this long, thank you for watching. If you have this long, please feel free to comment anything about just anything that has stuck out to you in this, or if you have any like related stories or articles or things you want to show us. Go watch that Netflix documentary because it's super fascinating, very bingeable. And that's that.
See you next time.
Holy cow, it went for so long. Never so